It is time for the weekly wrap up. These are stories that I collect throughout the week that I did not get to do a full video on, but I break them down really quickly through this video. So let's first start with this one from John Adirola tweeting this out, saying study finds rates of erectile dysfunction 3 times higher after COVID infection. So if there wasn't already many reasons not to get COVID and to ensure you are vaccinated, here is another one for the guys. So let's take a closer look, and has quite the visual here. Though I have to question the size of the group here. But let's look at what it says. So get your vaccines, guys. Prevalence of erectile dysfunction among male COVID patients relative to control group in Italian study. So 9% of men in the control group reported erectile problems versus 28% of men in the COVID positive group. So, I mean, what else do I have to say? Don't get COVID-19. It will impact your ability to perform. All right. Next story. There's going to be an election that is likely to be called on Sunday. And if you're watching this video outside the live stream, this is going up on Sunday, but this is something to think about. Canada flouting international law by continuing Saudi arms sales, report says. So I've covered this particular issue many times now, and they continue doing it. So this is going to be one of those things that are, it's barely going to be discussed in terms of the foreign policy discussion is almost, nada when it comes to Canadian elections. But maybe it'll be explored. But there's going to be, just really 30 days for this election. The election day is likely going to be September 20th. But this is something to think about, is Canada's foreign policy, the Liberal Party's foreign policy, and how it's been a largely disaster over Trudeau and over Liberals in general over their entire reign. But that said, when we get to the election discussion, it's going to be Trudeau winning a minority or a majority. It just depends on which one it's going to be. But let's hope it's a minority, as that allows the other parties to get involved in the discussion and limits the power of the Liberals. Next, let's take a look at this clip from Katie Porter. So Katie Porter, of course, one of the fantastic Democrats in Congress. Let's check out this discussion she had with Public Citizen.
But if I get it right, the story you're saying is that oil companies are drilling on public lands, taking the oil out, then using a subsidiary or a front company or a shell company or whatever to declare bankruptcy, and then just leaving the well behind to just be a mess or to let the taxpayers clean up. Is that fair? And if that's right, then what does bonding have to do with it?
That's absolutely what it is. So the idea behind bonding is that you, the polluter, the driller, because there is no way to drill in a way that doesn't create some need for environmental remediation after you're done. The wells don't cap themselves, okay? You have to do the work. And so the idea is that you buy a bond, you basically put down, you purchase a bond, you put down a portion of the money, and the company says, if you don't pay for this, people can look to the bond to cover the cost. And what's happening is those bonding requirements are so low that it doesn't even begin to cover the costs of capping the well, of doing the environmental remediation, of doing the cleanup. And so what happens is one of two things, and they're both really, really bad for the American people. Either these wells sit abandoned, where they prevent both, potential risks of people wandering onto the land, getting harmed, the land is polluted, it can't be used. And that's a loss, an economic loss to the taxpayers, or the federal government, pick up the tab and do the work, or we put it onto the states. This is really simple for me as a parent. If you want to dump the bin of Legos out on the floor and play with the Legos, that's fine. You will pick up every single Lego. Every parent understands this. You want to make a mess, you got to pick it up. Same thing for the oil and gas companies. You want to drill, you need to clean up your messes. You can't just walk off and leave the rest of us on the hook. Everyday American people working hard, many of them making minimum wage, people paying taxes. Why are we on the hook for cleaning up after your profits? The mess you made to make a buck is your problem to clean up. That comes out of your buck. It should not be on the rest of us.
So that is one of the many ways that fossil fuel companies steal from the public. You know, in addition to stealing our future, it is just, you would think the bare minimum that they should be responsible for cleaning up their own mess. And even that, the government lets them off the hook in most cases. Next up here, Nathan Bernard tweets out this incredible story saying COVID denier dies of COVID after being red-pilled on vaccines, ivermectin, and natural immunity by medical quack YouTuber Brett Weinstein. So Brett Weinstein is one of these guys that, tries to be or pretends to be this liberal voice, but everything he does is conservative. So example here, this guy died from COVID-19 after watching Brett Weinstein. So headline, COVID-19 devastated families plea after death of lawyer who refused to get coronavirus vaccine. Leslie Lawrenson's family said he had a misguided belief that because he was in his 50s with no known underlying health conditions, his body could fend off the virus naturally. Well, let's take a look at what Leslie Lawrenson has been sharing before he died. People need to watch this. Red pilled on COVID vaccine, Dark Horse production. This is Brett Weinstein's podcast. He shared that on, looks like, Facebook. Why is this information being blocked? Big tech censorship on ivermectin. So again, this is the Dark Horse podcast. This is Brett Weinstein's podcast. And yeah, that guy died. So one more thing here. This is a tweet from Brett Weinstein. This has always been about life and death. I've been clear about that. COVID is a dangerous disease. I've said so often, but you can only imagine what follows that. So here's a guy that, again, I'm a liberal, but everything I do is conservative because that's where the money is. That's where the views are. That's where the eyeballs are. People are reactionaries. The algorithms work in our favor. So we pretend to be liberals while actually being on the right. And this guy, his bullshit ended up infecting this person's mind and they died. This story. Police chief says deputies fatally shoot military veteran. Left flank veterans on that story says he called the suicide hotline, said if cops show up, there will be blood. So cops showed up and killed him within 20 minutes. This is why I discuss defund the police. Move resources, which means, the way I'm discussing it, move resources away from the police and put those resources into other areas, like mental health care professionals, who should have been the ones to show up to this call. But instead, cops showed up and killed this military veteran who was going through a mental health crisis. Absolutely disgusting. Last thing here, Republican Josh Hawley, who is just so insufferable, and you'll see why in this clip. Here he is discussing the infrastructure bill and never actually manages to say anything.
It's not really about infrastructure at all. It's about woke politics. Why is President Biden so enthusiastically for it? Because it advances his far left agenda. The Green New Deal, elements of it across this bill, the climate change agenda, it's stuffed into this bill, quotas for this, that, and the other in this bill. So this is a bill that is about the woke political agenda of the left. It is being paid for with this massive pork barrel spending. And I just hope Republicans will open their eyes to what's actually in the bill. You know, when you get a bill this late in the process that's 2,700 plus pages long, sometimes it's tempting not to actually look and see what's in the bill. Folks should look and see what's in this bill. I think it's going to be awfully hard to explain to Republican voters that we have gone along, or some Republicans have gone along with this kind of an agenda, this sort of a social agenda, this kind of pork barrel spending. And so I think it's absolutely vital that Republicans take a principled stand and say we're not going to be part of Joe Biden's left-wing agenda. We're not going to advance his woke political agenda. We're going to stand up for the principles that we share and believe in as Americans. We're going to stand up for some basic fiscal responsibility. And for those reasons, we're going to vote no on this bill. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, that's how you say absolutely nothing at all. Minute 14. Said nothing. Woke, spending, Green New Deal, left-wing agenda. Didn't mention what's in the bill. How a lot of it, in terms of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, is largely a corporate giveaway. The ability for companies to potentially privatize roads and put tolls on them. So this is why you had, I think it was 19 Republicans, senators, sign on to the bipartisan infrastructure bill because they know it benefits their corporate donors, including Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell was a yes vote on the infrastructure plan. So this is why, I mean, I've discussed countless times now, the budget reconciliation bill that Bernie's putting forward that only requires 51 votes, that is the one that has all the benefits for the average person. So Medicare expansion, child tax benefit expansion, money for climate change, and various other provisions. So that's where the actual, that's a bill that needs to get passed. But you have here Josh Hawley freaking out about the one that is actually pro-corporate. And again, it's all for performance. This is a guy that has no real principles. He tries to put himself out there as a populist, but doesn't actually fight for anything that is populist, does not fight for increasing wages, does not fight for expanding healthcare, doesn't fight for anything that's actually benefiting people. He's just a mouthpiece for the far right, and it's obvious from bullshit like this where he says nothing of substance for a minute and 14 seconds. But there you go. That is your wrap up for the week.